Let's get started. So I apologize for not being here last week. We posted the replay of the listing presentation. So hopefully you guys were able to watch that and got something useful and beneficial out of that. Today we're taking it to the next step. So we've done the listing presentation, signed that listing agreement, and we are going to take it from contract to close. So that's our goal today. On the screen, you will see the transaction action plan. I've shared this before. I'm going to throw it in the chat box again so that you have a link to it. Let's see, copy link. We have one of these for the buyer transaction, and I have one of these for the seller transaction. So this one's for the seller, obviously. And this is like, hey, in an ideal world, what does the process look like from signed listing agreement or contract to close? So you'll see here as well, when you look at the transaction action plan, that there's a couple of different roles identified, like agent roles, and then like or agent TC roles and agent TC admin. So as you continue to grow in success, and you will begin growing your team, the first thing that you'll want to do is add a TC. Melina in the office is fabulous for that purpose. That you don't even, you can do that on your first or second transaction. I always like everybody to kind of understand SkySlope, understand the anatomy of a transaction before you hand it off to a TC, but it's never too early to hand it off to a transaction coordinator. They get paid per transaction. So it's not something that you pay if it doesn't close, not something you got to pay out of pocket in advance. They get paid through closing. So it's worth every single penny that you do. If you haven't had a conversation with Melina yet, I highly recommend that you make an appointment to sit down with her, to talk with her about what a transaction coordinator does, what she's going to do for you on your files, what she doesn't do, what's still your responsibility, so that you have a good grasp of what that's going to look like. But that being said, column C is as we hand stuff off to the TC, these are things that our transaction coordinator are going to do for us versus what we're going to do. And then as you continue to grow your team, once you hit kind of that like consistent at least a transaction a month, like somewhere between 10 and 12 transactions per year, once you're consistently closing that, you've got those built up in your pipeline, then I would say it's a good idea then to start thinking about bringing on an admin for that next step. And so you'll see column D then takes some of the tasks off the agent's plates and puts them into that admin role. So this is kind of set up so you can see what it would look like as you begin to grow and hand things off. All right. That being said, this transaction action plan starts with the listing appointment. We already talked about that, right? We're going to get that signed listing agreement, drop off that pre-listing package, actually have the listing appointment. Once we have that listing agreement signed, then we start our pre-listing work. And one of the things that I have listed here that I'd like to show you is, which I can also share a link to. I just got to get into the right Google Drive. So give me just a second because I closed out my Google Drive, but I was going to show you, I have a set of emails that I send out to my sellers once we have a signed listing agreement that preps them for the listing process. Okay, so it sets us up for success. Let's see, emails. Copy of listing email templates. That should be opening. I'm going to share that with you in the chat box as well, once it opens all the way. And again, feel free to use these, not use these, edit these. This is just like, hey, I had my listing appointment. I've got that signed listing agreement. What happens next? And that's all that kind of pre-listing work that we're going to talk about today. I'm going to work really hard to wrap this up in an hour. There's so much that goes on. And when my computer's slow, it makes it even harder, but that's all right. Here we go. We're going to copy the link. Done. Let me throw that in the chat box. All right. So my listing emails that go out, the first one is, hey, thank you so much for trusting me listing your home. I have a Google form that I have them fill out that they input all the information that is needed for the MLS. It takes them through step by step. Do you have solar? Yes or no. If they say no, it just moves on to the next section. If they say yes, it starts asking them questions about their solar. Do you have a pool? What kind of roof do you have? How old is your water heater? How do you like to be contacted, right? So do you have children? What are their names and ages? Do you have pets? What are their names and ages, right? Or what are they and what are their names type thing. So it just walks them through, it gets me to know the complete picture of who my sellers are and all the information I'm going to need to put that listing in to the MLS so that I'm not guessing on the information that's going in the MLS. It's actually the seller giving me the information that I need. Things to watch for as we get closer to on market date, to get me a spare key if we don't have one already. A for sale sign is going to go up in your yard. We're going to be scheduling professional photos, right? We will be scheduling pre-listing inspections that were discussed. My transaction coordinator will be handling all the paperwork, right? I'm introducing the team on this first email. Continue to look for emails from me to help get your home ready to shine and make the transaction seamless. And then I give them some tips to prep their home for professional photos, right? So we're just getting that out of the way up front so they can start working on that. Email number 2 that goes out, and the timing of these emails totally depends on how fast that property needs to go on the market versus when we got that listing agreement signed. Okay, there's no wrong or right answer. If I got the listing agreement signed today and we're going on next week, they're probably going to get almost an email a day from me before we hit the on market date. Versus if we're a month out, then I'm going to drip on them like once a week with these emails. Email number 2 just says, hey, what's going to stay with the property and what's going to go? What's considered a fixture, what's not. And are there items that they do not wish to leave with the property? And are there items that they would like to leave with the property, right? So just asking that question. Email number 3 talks about carbon monoxide and smoke detectors, as well as the water heater bracing. I'm asking them to check and make sure they have those, if not to install them. If they need help getting those things installed, to let me know, because I'm happy to make suggestions of handyman or whoever that can help that. The next one goes out from my transaction coordinator, and it's just the email with the link to HomeLight Listing Management, which we'll talk about here in a minute. An email from letting them know that they're going to get an email from Glide for the seller disclosures, and then attaching the seller information sheet if I've pre-opened escrow from that escrow company so that they can get the payoff and everything ordered from their current lender, to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row before we hit full send on the listing, before we go active. Okay. Email number 5 is showing your home. This just introduces the fact that I like to use showing time to schedule showings, that they're going to get their own app. And that they'll get notified directly when people request a showing. They can either approve those showings or deny those showings. And I let them know that, hey, if you're going to deny it, let them know when a better time would be. And if possible, right, set expectations, do whatever you can to make the requested showing time work. Okay. In this email also, it talks about, here are some expectations I have of you to make your home show ready. Vacate the property while it's being shown. Plan on leaving 10 minutes prior to the scheduled showing time, and plan for 45 minutes per showing. Turn on all the lights, keep the house at a comfortable temperature, open drapes and blinds, keep pets and pets related items secured outdoors, play quiet background music, light the fireplace if seasonally appropriate and you're going to be nearby, infuse the home with a comforting scent like apple spice or vanilla, right? Even if you're going to be gone for the day, make sure your home is show ready, even if we don't have any showings scheduled. Okay. Email number 6 is our on market date. I include a link from my website for their listing so that they can see what that looks like on market. And just set the expectation that, hey, we're going to update you on your property weekly. You'll receive an email on Monday and a call on Tuesday. When we receive offers, we'll notify you immediately and let you know that an offer has been received and set a plan to review offers. So I'm letting them know that, hey, this is the expectation. I'll let you know on Monday how things are going. And if we do get an offer, I'll be in contact. And then this is a note for the transaction coordinator, just to double check that the disclosures were completed and that the seller information sheet was completed and returned to title. If not, they're going to remind them in that email. Email number 7 is once we are in contract. So once we are in contract, we send that to make sure that they have all the information they need, including all the dates that are coming with that transaction. When we entered into escrow, when the contingencies are due, when the close of escrow is scheduled for, if they get to stay in possession after the close of escrow, how long they have to do that. And then this one goes to the title and other agents. So those are my email templates. So you'll see those here in the, we get signed listing agreement and then we start listing emails. That's when we start those. That takes us to our pre-listing work. Number 1 is we want to make sure to update our database so that we mark them as a client, and move them out of our nurture touch campaign and into an active campaign. We don't want to be dripping on them with an automated text message or an email that says, hey, some things to consider when getting your home ready for sale when their home's already active and for sale. So update that database. I'm going to make sure the listing paperwork, that's my listing agreement, anything that was signed by them goes to my transaction coordinator. Send the seller contact info to your transaction coordinator. They should have those buyers' emails the seller's emails and phone numbers in case they need to get in touch with them. Your transaction coordinator is going to input that listing into SkySlope. That needs to be done within 24 hours of signed listing agreement. So you need to make sure we get that signed listing agreement over to your transaction coordinator right away so that they can get that into SkySlope. Create an HLM file. That's HomeLight Listing Management. Oops, there we go. This is HomeLight Listing Management. You have access to HomeLight Listing Management through the Barry's MLS. So when you go to log into the MLS on that useful apps or links page, you can access this. I create a file for every single listing that I have. I just go in there and you, I don't even know, create property package is what you do. And this is where I put the seller disclosures, any reports, any the preliminary title when it comes in. This is where I put all that information so that I can link it onto the MLS so that people have access to it before they even submit offers. And so that I know everybody has this information. So like if you open this file up, if there's offer instructions, that's in there. Roof inspections, home inspections, pest, if there's a county disclosure, and then all the things that the seller signed that the buyer is going to need a copy of, copies of the tax records, the CC&Rs, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that come off of the preliminary title report, the NHD report, the natural hazard zone disclosure is going to go into this file. And then all those booklets, residential environmental hazards, protect your family from lead, home energy rating pamphlet, cybercrime flyer, homeowner's guide to earthquake safety. So all that stuff goes into this file as well. So that's when it says create HLM file. I like to have that created prior to putting that property in as active in the MLS so that I can link that file. So from here, I can hit share package and I can hit get share link. I always mark the box. Users with this link can immediately view documents, and then I copy that link and I put it into the MLS so that agents have access to that when they write the offer, before they write an offer, and they can share that with their clients as well. So that's the HLM, HomeLight Listing Management. Glide is the other tool that we have available to us through the MLS, through Barry's MLS. Glide. So Glide is what I like to send out all of the disclosures that have questions the sellers need to answer. So some of our disclosures are just like, they're just, advisories, right? Like the seller or buyer inspection advisory, the wildfire disaster advisory, the square footage and lot size, right? So there's so many things that are just advisories. They just need to be signed by the seller. They don't have anything to complete. Although the square footage one was a bad example because it does have information on there for the seller to complete. But like your carbon monoxide water carbon monoxide water conserving plumbing fixtures, your smoke detector, all those just need signatures. The ones that have questions that need to go out are going to be like your seller property questionnaire, your transfer disclosure statement, your lead-based paint hazards if the house was built before 1978, and earthquake hazards if it was built before 1965. So you would just come in here, hit new transaction, you would create that transaction file, and then it allows you to send out the disclosure package to the sellers for completion. Sellers can do this in person as well. I don't like sending out the disclosure package via DocuSign or Authentisign because it's too confusing. It puts boxes on every single yes or no, things get missed, explanations aren't required. When we put it into Glide to do it, then if it's going to take them through just 1 or 2 questions at a time, and you can put yourself in here as a seller and send it to yourself so you can see what a seller would see when they are filling this information out. But it just asks them a question at a time. If they mark something yes, it's going to ask them for an explanation, and they can't move on until they give that explanation. So it's a really good system to make sure all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. So that is, again, Glide. And you'll see that here, send disclosures out via Glide. Okay, transfer disclosure, SPQ, lead, earthquake, wildfire, if it's in a high fire hazard severity zone, and the exempt seller disclosure if they don't have to fill out any of the other forms. I usually try to make sure I have a picture of the front of the home, especially if it's in an area that does not participate in the clear cooperation policy, which allows us to market those properties as coming soon. I may want to get it out there as coming soon before we have professional photos done. So I usually get a photo of the front of the house. It also allows me to be able to put that photo on my Glide file as well as my HomeLight listing management file. So instead of a little fake map, it does that. Are the disclosures pre-selected? Iris, on Glide, which I'm assuming you're asking about, they are not pre-selected, but it does give you like specific ones that you can choose from Glide. Glide doesn't have all of those. So when you go to view it'll say send disclosure package. You can invite sellers and then manage. It'll give you options, but it doesn't necessarily tell you which ones you need to send out. All right. We're going to make sure we get that listing inputted into the MLS. Okay. And you can input that listing. If my listing is supposed to go active next Wednesday, I can put it into the MLS today. I can get it all in there, photos, description, fill all the information out, as long as that date matches when it's actually supposed to hit the market in there. So there's 2 dates. One is a listing date and one is an on-market date. The listing date is the date we signed that listing agreement, okay, or the date as active on the listing agreement. The on-market date is when we agreed that it was going to go on market. So as long as that on-market date is next Wednesday's date, if I save and submit that listing today, it's going to go into review and then it'll sit there until midnight on the day it's supposed to go active, and then it'll automatically go active. So just a little heads up on that. We're going to input that listing into showing time with emails. So I make sure to put the emails that I have for my sellers in there in showing time, because when they create a login for showing time and download that app, it's going to ask them for an email. So if the emails are consistent, it'll automatically pull up their listing. If it's not, it won't match them to the listing. Input the disclosures, right? Upload those into HomeLight Listing Management. Put that HomeLight Listing Management link into the MLS. So this is really like a step-by-step transaction list. Then we're going to make sure we schedule pictures, order any staging, and order any pre-listing inspections that were supposed to be done. Order that sign install within 10 days of on market. Now keep in mind that only Berries, which is Solano, Napa, Sonoma, Mendocino, and Marin counties, can have that sign in the yard at any time. Okay, we're allowed to market coming soon. If you're talking Yolo, Sacramento, Placer, Roseville, the Bay Area counties, like Contra Costa, right, those, then we're not allowed to mark it as coming soon. So that sign cannot go up in the yard until 24 hours the day before it's going to go active in the MLS. Okay, but we can order the sign to be installed on a specific date, at least 10 days prior to its on market date. So as soon as you can, you get that sign ordered with the date. Make a copy of the house key. This is so important. They're going to give you a copy of that house key. You want to make sure that you make a copy of it, because in case something happens, an agent walks away with the key from out of the lockbox, the sellers lock themselves out of the house, because it's not uncommon for sellers not to actually lock their house most days. And then now their doors get locked and they can't get back in. They're going to ask you for a copy of that house key. So I always have a spare copy of the house key, so that one in the lockbox is not my only copy. Make sure you install that lockbox, open pre-escrow, order that natural hazard zone disclosure report, upload it to HomeLight Listing Management, send that intro email to the sellers, review those disclosures for completeness, send the disclosures to sellers and listing agent for completion. They need to sign. Send seller info request to title. That was the page the sellers were supposed to complete. Send out those just listed postcards. Okay, that's marketing. Upload disclosures to Disclosures.io. That's HomeLight Listing Management. It used to be Disclosures.io. Oops. Okay. Upload any reports, inspections to Disclosures.io. Upload that prelim and CC&Rs to Disclosures.io. That's HomeLight Listing Management again. And then that should bring us to the listing actually going active. So all those things, including marketing, are all things that happen in that pre-listing process. Any questions about the pre-listing process before we move on to what happens once the listing goes active?
Nope, we're good.
Fabulous. All right, active listing. I highly recommend that we have open houses on our listings. Number one, we should be leveraging those listings for additional leads. So the open house is a great way to do that. If not, sellers and open houses in general are just a great way to lead generate. So it's a great thing to do. And sellers think that open houses sell homes. Okay, we know because we're agents that only 1% of homes sell by open house, but sellers don't know that. They usually like open houses. It makes them feel like you're actively doing something. If you're not available to host that open house, you can always ask for other agents in our office to host those open houses. Get feedback from the open house. So if we had somebody else host it for us, follow up with them, ask them what the feedback was, how many people passed through, so you can report that back to your seller on your Monday check-in. Okay. In addition, if you hosted the open house, just compile that feedback for them. Send that listing report to seller from the MLS, and that's on the market day. So we like to send that report out. Send the status update. That's going to go out in my email. I said I was going to send out a status update every Monday. So they're going to get a status update from me on, hey, here's how many showings we had. Here's how the open house went. You can actually go into List Track. It's one of the tools we have through Realty One Group Fox on our one login. And it will actually do a nice summary report of the online activity for that property. It's actually kind of fabulous. So I would recommend checking that out, making that part of your status update so that they can kind of see the activity. Input the open houses into the MLS. Make sure you do that. Set your marketing plan into action and negotiate any price improvements as necessary. So if our property has been sitting on the market, we're not getting showings, or we're getting a lot of showings and no offers, with the feedback being that the price is a little on the high side, or we're not getting any showings. Number one, if we're not getting any showings, before I jump to, hey, we need to do a price adjustment, unless I just know that that property was priced too high going on the market. Okay. But if I feel like I probably priced it appropriately, we're not getting a lot of showings, I may call some other agents in the area, some other agents that have houses that are active around my listing, and ask them what kind of activity they're getting. And if it's just like a lull week where there's just not a lot of buyers in the market, sometimes that happens, like the week before the election, or I like to call it the back to school lull that happens kind of the end of August, mid-August to the end of August when kids go back to school. people are distracted getting their kids back to school and they're not looking at property. So sometimes it's just like, hey, that's what the market's doing. Other times you might call somebody and they're like, oh yeah, we had so many showings this weekend. I think we're going to get multiple offers. And you're gonna be like, cool, we're definitely priced out of the market. We need to do a price adjustment. So I always do some research before I recommend a price adjustment. If we're going to do that, we'll send out that price improvement paperwork. Input listing modification into the MLS. So that would be, you know, if we're doing the price adjustment, we got to do that adjustment in the MLS, upload all those changes to SkySlope, and update SkySlope with changes. Okay. That takes us active listing to accepted offer. Okay. So that's all the stuff that we're doing as we're like waiting for that offer to come in. And when we finally get an offer to come in, we want to make sure we review offers and prep for seller presentation. So I'm going to take some time to review that offer, make sure there's nothing hidden in there, make sure I've looked at every piece of paper, make sure I understand every term. If we have a, let's see if we've got the listing or offer. I've got a multiple offer comparison spreadsheet. I actually like to use this even if it's not multiple offers because it just puts the terms all in one place that makes it easy for the seller to digest without getting distracted. I will throw this in the chat box as well. Oh, I will have to do this later because it's not in my folder. So anyways, but this allows you to line out all the terms of the offers side by side. So that's how I like to present it to my seller. Not that they don't get to see a copy of the list or the purchase agreement that got sent over, but sometimes that can be a little distracting. So I kind of like that one page. I hide the columns. Here, if I only had one offer, I'd hide the rest of the columns. Otherwise, I'd fill in the information over to however many offers I got and then hide the rest. So we want to make sure that we present those offers to the seller. You want to make sure to call lenders to verify the buyer information. Verify that the lender's actually seen their income and asset documentation. Make sure they've actually pulled a copy of their credit report and looked at it, that these are ready to go buyers. Okay. If you can't get a hold of the lender, that could be a red flag that that's how that's going to go for the rest of the transaction. We want to make sure then to present those offers to the sellers once we've got a good picture of who our buyers are, what those offers entail. And then we'll send the accepted offer to the seller for signatures. And remember, we can always counter with either a seller counter offer or a seller multiple counter offer. And then we're going to get all those offers over to our transaction coordinator. Okay. That brings us to actually in contract. This is a good time to send those under contract postcards out. You can do that through OneDesign, through OnePrint. They will select those people for you. We talked about the just listed postcards. I would send those postcards to the same like 100 people around that listing because we want to get exposure to those people. Not only are they seeing our signs, they saw our open house signs, they saw our just listed sign. Now they're going to see our under contract postcards. So we are touching those 100 people around because we know that somebody that can see that for sale sign in that yard is going to list their property for sale. And we want to capture that business. When we send out those postcards, part of our marketing isn't just like under contract, but it might be like under contract in 3 days, our first weekend on market, under contract over list price, right? Whatever that is that would make somebody else want to pick up the phone and call you to list their house. Make sure you spend that in the right way. Send any accepted offers, counters, proof of funds to your transaction coordinator. Send any rejected offers to the transaction coordinator. You need to move the MLS to contingent. So you've got a couple options in the MLS from active. We can either go contingent show, contingent no show, or pending. Pending is when the buyer has removed all of the contingencies. So no loan, no appraisal, no inspection, no review of seller disclosures, no review of leased and liened items. They've removed all the contingencies. As long as there's contingencies in place, you're either going to go contingent show or contingent no show. Contingent show is handy if you want people to continue looking at the property and maybe you want a backup offer versus like, and a lot of times if my homes are vacant, I'll leave it contingent show. If it's occupied, oftentimes we'll move it to contingent no-show so that the sellers aren't continued to get bombarded with showing requests after they're already in contract. Iris, have a list of documents, not necessarily that need to go to the TC, but kind of what needs to be included in your listing. Hold on just a second. It's called the Survival Guide. On this new agent survival guide, I will share this with you. Down, I think it's like page 6 or so. There is a list, which I think was recently updated. Right here that talks about basic document requires. So on the listing side and then the buyer side. So let me share that with you. There you go. Your TC should let you know if they're missing anything. And then, you know, part of the joy of the TC is they're gonna, for anything that's missing, they'll reach out to the sellers to get that information from them or send it out for signatures. For the most part, once we get an accepted offer, we just want anything that that buyer's agent sent us signed and sent over to the our transaction coordinator. Okay. All right. So contingent. Send intro email to escrow, send completed offer, counter offer to buyer's agent with intro. The intro usually includes like, here's the key dates. So make sure we're all in agreement. Upload all offers into SkySlope. Again, your transaction coordinator will do that. Create a demand. We usually don't do this necessarily until the end of the transaction, but it's always good to kind of have it ready to go. You want to complete your agent visual inspection disclosure. Please do not do this before you enter into contract on your listings. Do it once you've entered into contract. The agent visual inspection disclosure is the base idea behind it is that it's your disclosure of any material defects that you see in the property at time of offer is important, because if we do it 2 weeks before and then something else happens to the property or the sellers fix something or they remedy something, now we've reported on something that no longer exists or it's obsolete and it doesn't actually depict the true nature of the property or the true condition of the property at time of offer. The other thing that's nice about the Avid, and I use Glide to do all of my Avids, is that it will be kind of your proof of the condition of the property on the day that the offer was accepted. Okay, so I usually try to do it within like 24 hours of accepted offer, because the seller's required to deliver that property to our buyer in the same condition as on the date of the offer being accepted. So I want to know what that condition was, which is why I like using Glide for it. You can actually get the Glide app on your phone. You can log in once that file's been created. You can click on it and go to right here, fill and add Avid right here. So you can just click on that. It allows you to add pictures to your Avid. So you can take pictures and add notes. And I never, ever, ever, ever put nothing noted on a room. Okay, so I may just even note like no major spots or discoloration on carpet, right? We try to avoid things like stains and large or small things that are subjective. So we want to use words because we're not experts. So if there's a discoloration on the ceiling, even if we're 100% sure that it was probably a water stain, we're not the expert. So we would just want to say discoloration on ceiling. If there's nothing to note in a room, instead of saying nothing noted, I'd just be like, no holes in walls, no spots on carpet, right? No noticeable defects, right? So whatever that would be. So I would just note that. And then I always take a picture of the room and the pictures of all the defects. So that's my Avid, your agent visual inspection disclosure. And again, you can create your own little Glide file in there for yourself, and you can go in there and practice and play around with those tools as well. We're going to get that prelim and CC&Rs from the title company. We're going to make sure we have that NHD report if we didn't have it already. We're going to confirm the information on the prelim. So we want to make sure that who we had signed the listing agreement is who's showing up as the owner on the preliminary title report. We want to make sure the address matches. We want to make sure the APNs match so that everything is accurate and perfect with what's on that purchase agreement, what's on that prelim. and what's on our listing agreement. Any additional disclosures that need to be completed get sent out for signatures. That might be like the NHD report has a signature page. The Avid, once it's completed, gets signed, and then anything else. We want to confirm that the selling agent, that's the buyer's agent, has reviewed the HomeLight listing management file and has everything they need as far as disclosures go. So that's usually something I check in on the first beginning of the transaction for a day or two. Hey, just making sure that you've accessed that file. Is there anything in there that's missing that you're going to need for your file? Because I want to know as soon as possible so that they can have a complete disclosure set for their file. I'm going to check in with that listing agent, make sure, or the buyer's agent, sorry, the selling agent is the buyer's agent, confirm any with them when they're going to do inspections. And because I want my sellers to be gone during inspections. I usually then turn around and input those inspections into showing time so that they show up on the schedule as time that's going to be occupied for that property, and let the buyers or let the sellers know that they need to be gone during that time. I'm going to complete my appraisal packet for my appraiser prior to the appraisal. That's where I get to handpick the comps that I want the appraiser to use, talk about any updates or upgrades that have been done to the property and any selling benefits. Remind the buyer's agent of the investigation contingency deadline and the deadline to return signed disclosures. I'm going to do that 5 days prior to the inspection contingency or whatever contingency deadline. And then again, 1 day before, I'm going to let them know that it's due the next day. I want to stay on top of that and get those contingencies removed. We're going to make sure to get inspection copies. Remember, per our residential purchase agreement, the buyer's required to provide us with copies of all inspection reports that are completed on the property. And if it's a VA or an FHA buyer, they are also required to provide us with a copy of the appraisal. Conventional appraisals, the seller does not get a copy of. We're going to review those buyer return disclosures for completeness. Make sure the buyer filled out everything they were supposed to. Make sure they signed and dated where they needed to. Negotiate any repair requests, extensions of time, etc. that need to be done. So that's usually about the time that we get those repair requests from a buyer. And scheduling any repairs as necessary. Remember, when a buyer requests repairs, number one, the seller doesn't even have to respond to that repair request. There is no obligation on the seller's behalf for them to respond to it. I think it's good etiquette to respond to that repair request, even if you're denying it. But the seller can deny the repairs. They can counter that repair request. And usually I have a conversation with the buyer's agent if I get a repair request of what's really important to the buyer. Are there things that we can leave off? Can we do a credit instead of repairs? Whatever that might be, I'm going to have that conversation so that we can negotiate those repair requests. Remind buyer's agent of that appraisal contingency, the loan contingency. Again, request appraisal copy if it's FHA or a VA loan. Upload all those inspections and the appraisal to HomeLight Listing Management. I put all the stuff in there, so it's all in one place. Once we've removed all those contingencies, then we want to remember to move the MLS to pending. And once we move it to pending, that's a good time to schedule the staging removal if the house was staged with property. Okay, or 7 days prior to close of escrow, as long as you think it's going to close on time. Schedule that sign removal for the close of escrow date. I usually order that about 3 days prior to the close of escrow. Your transaction coordinator can also do that for you. Send out contingency removal disclosures to sellers and listing agent for signatures. That would be like the buyer's Avid report, because they also do one. Contingency removals. Contingency removals don't technically get signed by the seller, but I usually have my seller initial them so that they know those contingencies have been removed. Additional buyer disclosures, anything that needs signatures, we're kind of like wrapping it up by this point. Send the signed contingency removal or disclosures back to buyer's agent. Upload all those signed documents into SkySlope. Double check that commission demand for accuracy. Send demand to title. Send any invoices to title for payment. That'd be if you're getting reimbursed for like photos or repairs, etc. Prep the sellers for signing. This is usually where I communicate to my sellers that we are moving into preparing to close. The sellers don't have to wait for the buyers to sign. Once all those contingencies are removed, we've negotiated all the terms, we're moving towards that closing. Anytime the sellers can sign at that point. So we prep those sellers for signing. I'm going to find out, hey, do you want to go to the title company? Do you want to sign at the property? Where do you want to sign? What's your schedule? Then I'm going to take all that information and I'm going to get it over to the title company with the seller's contact information and tell the title company to contact them directly to schedule the signing. Okay, so we're going to schedule seller signing once we prep them. We want to make sure we get a copy of the estimated settlement statements. We're going to make sure everything on there is accurate. If the sellers were supposed to pay for the buyer's home warranty, if there was a credit to the buyers, if the buyers are, if the seller's staying in the property after the close of escrow and there was a deposit being held, make sure the commissions are accurate on there. If there was an invoice or something that was scheduled to be paid by the seller, make sure that invoice is on there. So we just want to make sure it's accurate. Then we'll make sure to send a copy of that over to our sellers to review before they're signing. So that way, if they have any questions, they can get it taken care of before they actually sit down to sign. If you have a seller satisfaction survey that you want them to fill out at signing, get that over to title so they can complete it. You can attend your seller signing. I generally don't attend my seller signings. I usually let them know that, hey, just a reminder that you're signing today at 6 p.m. I will not be there at the signing, but I will have my phone available and watching for you in case you have any questions or concerns as you begin that process. So I usually just comfort them and let them know. If you've got a referral reward program, send that over to the sellers. This is a great time when they're getting ready to sign their paperwork. It's a great time to have the sellers give you referrals of other people they may know that are looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate. Then we want to make sure we review our SkySlope file for completeness. Make sure we get anything back from the buyer's agent that we need. Make sure that they, send anything out for final signatures. Also, the buyer is going to schedule their final walkthrough sometime in those last, per the contract, if it's left at the default, it's supposed to be on the 5th day prior to the close of escrow. They should be scheduling that final walkthrough to ensure that the property is in the same condition as when the offer was accepted and that any repairs that had been negotiated were completed. So that's kind of your time frame on when the repairs should be completed. Once we find from title that we are on record, they will send us out an email and say, congratulations, it's officially, we've just gotten confirmation that it's on record. You want to send the officially closed email or phone call to the sellers. Remember during this process too, that we want to be aware of the seller's thoughts and feelings of how they are taking this move, whether they're excited about this move or whether they're a little disappointed that they're selling this house and that they're having to move, or maybe it was a family home that they're selling. So we want to be aware of that, and we want to make sure that our tone matches the seller's feelings on the sale as we go through this whole process. Once the property is closed, so once we get that, so what usually happens is the sellers sign a few days before closing, the buyers sign, right? Then the lender funds it, and then it actually gets released to record. And then once it's on recorded, that's when it's on record, and that's when the property ownership switches hands. Now, this is a good time too, as we're moving into those final closing days, like maybe 10 days prior to the close of escrow. If the sellers are living in the property, it's a good time to remind them that they're supposed to leave that property free of any trash, free of any belongings, and swept clean. They don't have to professionally clean it, but it's a good time to remind them of that. And then also remind them when they need to be out of the property. So for the most part, our contract defaults that the buyers get keys upon notice of recording. So we want to let the sellers know that, hey, generally speaking, we get, our confirmation of recording by like 10 a.m. on the date of the close of escrow. So you probably need to be out before then or have everything out prior to that. If the sellers are remaining after the close of escrow, we have an agreement in place, either our SIP, sellers in possession after the close of escrow, which goes up to 29 days, or our residential lease after sale, or RLAS, that goes from 30 days on to whenever. we can remind the seller as well what kind of time period they have or how much they're being charged per day as we're moving into that closing so that they can be made aware and decide how long they're actually going to need that property after the close of escrow. Any questions about that escrow contract to close process? I know there's a lot of items in there. But that's why I did this list, is to try to keep it all straight and give you something like, hey, on the, if everything went according to plan, this is kind of how it would work.
I'm good.
All right. Fabulous. All right. Once we get that notice that it's been recorded, then we go to closed. Then, your job still isn't over. We got to take that in the MLS and move it now from pending to closed. We got to complete our SkySlope file, that SkySlope file being complete, which again, that's usually what the transaction coordinator does for you. That ensures that you're going to get paid as soon as that check comes in from the title company. So you have to have that completed SkySlope file to get your check. You can input your closed sale into Zillow. So if you've created that Zillow login as an agent, you can create a free Zillow profile. You can go in there and claim that sale as yours, so it'll show up in your recent sales. We want to make sure to remember to remove the lockbox from the property. This is usually done after the buyer has gotten keys. Usually I ask the buyer's agent to let me know when they've pulled the keys out of the lockbox to access the property to give to buyer. I usually let my sellers know as we're moving closer to the time that they're going to hand over keys, that they can put all the extra keys, remotes, whatever they might have, just inside a drawer in the kitchen. And that the buyers will be able to access the property through the key in the lockbox, and then they'll be able to get all those other keys and such out of that drawer. Once they've gotten the keys out of the lockbox, we want to make sure to remove that lockbox. You're going to make sure to remove it to closed in your CRM. If your sellers were living in that property, now's a good time to update their address. Now's a good time, if it was an investment property for them that they sold, to update that in your CRM as well, that they no longer own that property. And then we want to move those sellers to the sold touch campaign. I recommend then sending thank you cards out to the sellers, to the selling agents. Thank you card to your buyers, because now these buyers, you've got their address. They just moved into that property. Right? So we want to adopt those orphan. You can also send out a thank you card to the lender if they did a fabulous job, to the title company, to the inspectors, whoever was involved in that transaction. It's always nice to send them out a thank you card, because this business is based on relationships. So we want to build those relationships. Send out those just sold postcards, right? So we've got just listed, under contract, and just sold. That's at least 3 postcards that go out through every transaction. If you can find some other ways to slip in a couple others, that works as well. And we're going to send those to the same people. So we're going to send it to the same list of people again, because now that's 3 touches to them. In addition, we may have knocked on their door during that listing period, right? So hopefully we've got more interactions with them, but that's at least 3 through postcards. And again, same thing with your postcard here, is we want to deliver our story, right? Did we close in 27 days? Did we negotiate that the sellers could remain in the property for a month after the close of escrow? Like, what was the benefit? What was the win? And why would somebody who's looking at that postcard choose you to list their property? Deliver that closing gift to your sellers if you're going to do one. Archive. Remember, for the write-off on your closing gift, you are limited unless it's a marketing item. Check with your tax professional for what the difference is. You're then going to go in and archive that HomeLight listing management file, so it takes it off your active properties. Move your zip forms over to close. So again, it moves it off your active transactions. Update their address in the CRM and input those buyers into your CRM. Our goal is to adopt those buyers, and we're going to get their future transaction, because we know that National Association of Realtors statistics say that like 75% or 74% of clients say they're going to use the same agent again, but the ones that actually use the same agent is like closer to, it's like maybe 20%. Okay. And that's because what happens is these clients get orphaned. They close the transaction and they never hear from that agent again. So you want to be the one that slips in there, friend them on Facebook, follow up. You can even like deliver a closing gift to the buyers. Check in with them. Go by like a week or 2 after the close of escrow when they've gotten the keys. check in on them, take them the home warranty information. If they got a home warranty from the transaction, just be like, hey, I just wanted to check in, make sure everything was going okay with the house. Here's a copy of the home warranty in case you have any problems. Did you figure out how to make everything work? Because guess what? You know the sellers. So if there was something they were having problems with that wasn't functioning right, or they're having problems getting the ice maker and the fridge to work that got left by the sellers, you can always reach out to the sellers and be like, hey, is there a trick for the ice maker? Or is there a trick for the pool equipment? It seems to be running all the time. They'd be like, oh yeah, in fact, let me come over and I'll show them how to use it, right? Or, oh yeah, let me write up some instructions for them. So now you've become like, hey, I saved the day. Here's the instructions on how to operate that pool equipment, right? So you can drop that off. You could go by a couple weeks later and drop off just like a housewarming gift or whatever that might be. Like adopt those buyers into your own. So there you go. Make sure you put them in your CRM and you begin dripping on them with a 36 plus interaction campaign to convert them into your next client. So there you are, sellers, contracts to close. Any questions before we wrap up today? I finished 9 minutes early. Thank you. So there's lots of time for questions. All right, fabulous. Then we are going to wrap up for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. Next week, we are back on, I've got to decide on Wednesday. Wednesday's probably getting canceled because you guys should all be going to the office meeting in Santa Rosa next week to meet with those Santa Rosa agents. That's where we're holding the office huddle. So next week's open Q&A on car forms will be canceled. Sorry, Abby, I'm just making you aware of that. And then next Thursday, we're going to talk about creating clients for life. Same link, same time. We'll see you next Thursday. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.